They say some moments haunt you forever. Not just because of what happened, but because of who you became when it did. For me, it all started on a rainy Saturday afternoon. The kind of day that feels heavy even before anything goes wrong. The sky was this dull, washed-out gray, like it couldn't decide whether to cry or just keep everything bottled up. I stood by the kitchen window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely alone. James, my husband, had left earlier that morning for yet another business trip. No goodbye kiss. No warm smile. Just a rush to take care, and the sound of the front door clicking shut behind him. And as I watched him drive away, I couldn't help but wonder, when did we become so distant? When did my presence start feeling like background noise in his life? The kids were away for the weekend, staying with their grandmother. So the silence in the house? It wasn't peaceful. It was loud. That kind of silence that creeps into your chest and makes your heart ache. I wandered from room to room, tidying things that didn't need to be tidied, just to feel like I was still here. Still useful. Still visible. That's when my phone buzzed. A group message from Thomas, one of James's closest friends. But the chat included Malik and Evan too. All three of them. They said they were nearby. They wanted to drop in and hang out for a bit. Now, maybe I should have said no. Maybe I should have thought twice. But I didn't. I paused for a moment, fingers hovering over the screen, and then I typed back, "Sure, come on over." And just like that, I opened a door I didn't realize I'd never be able to close. I tried to pretend it was no big deal. Just friends visiting. People I'd known for years. But when they walked through that door, something shifted. I could feel it. The air felt warmer, thicker. Their laughter filled the space James used to fill. And for the first time in what felt like forever, someone actually looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Thomas gave me the soft smile, like he saw something in me I'd forgotten was there. Malik cracked jokes like he always did, but this time there was a certain sharpness in his tone. And Evan? He hugged me like he meant it. Like he remembered how it felt to hold a woman close. I brushed it off. I told myself I was being silly. That it was just my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew something had already started. Something dangerous. I was vulnerable. I was starved for affection. And I was standing in a quiet house with three men who suddenly made me feel seen. What happened next? I've never told anyone. Not even myself, not really. Because admitting it out loud would mean accepting who I became that day. But if you stay with me, if you really want to know, I'll tell you everything. Just be warned, this isn't the kind of story with heroes and villains. It's messier than that. It's real. And it changed everything. So before we go any further, take a breath, hit that subscribe button to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because the rest of this story, well, you're not going to believe what happened next. I married young. Maybe too young. Back then, everything felt simple, like love alone would be enough to build a life on. And in the beginning, it was. James swept me off my feet. He was that kind of man, confident, driven, the life of any room he stepped into. He could make a whole table laugh with a single comment. He had dreams, big ones, and I believed in every single one of them. I was proud of him. I wanted to be his peace, his home. And for a while, I think I was. But time has a way of wearing things down. And somewhere between the late nights at the office, the promotions, the deadlines, and the always too brief dinners, James stopped seeing me the way he used to. He started coming home later, smiling less, touching me like it was a chore, not a choice. We still shared a bed, but the space between us was colder than the sheets. I tried. God, I tried. I started cooking his favorite meals again. I lit candles. I bought new lingerie once. He barely looked up from his laptop. Said he was tired. I smiled and nodded like I understood, but inside, something cracked just a little more. We have 2 kids. Beautiful, noisy, full of life kids. When they're home, the house feels like a real home, Sticky fingers on the fridge door, crayon drawings taped to the walls, little footsteps running down the hallway. Their laughter used to be the thing that held me together. But even their joy couldn't hide the fact that James was always somewhere else. He was physically there, sure. But emotionally? He hadn't been in the same room as me for months. So I filled the silence the only way I knew how. I threw myself into making our house feel warm, inviting. If I couldn't fix our marriage, maybe I could fix the space around it. The living room became my little project. Soft beige curtains, gold-accented throw pillows, eucalyptus candles burning in the corners. A warm throw over the arm of the couch. Family pictures framed in wood along the staircase. Me, James, the kids. Frozen smiles. Quiet lies. It was around that time his friends started coming over more. Thomas was the first. He'd drop by on weekends sometimes, saying he was just passing through, but he always brought something. Pastries, a bottle of wine, once even a small bouquet of flowers for the hostess. He'd sit at the kitchen island and talk to me while I folded laundry or prepped dinner. He wasn't flirtatious, not exactly. But there was something comforting about his presence. He listened. He asked about my day. He laughed at my stories like they were actually funny. Malik came by too, loud and full of energy. He'd bring the kids little gifts. Comic books, candy, once even a mini drone. The kids adored him. And I appreciated the distraction. He was bold, always teasing, calling me Queen of the Castle and Wonder Mom. It was harmless at first. Just jokes. But there was a heat behind his eyes sometimes, a look that lingered a little too long when James wasn't around. Then there was Evan. Evan was different. He didn't talk as much. He didn't need to. He had this calm, confident energy that made you lean in just to feel it closer. He noticed things when I changed my hair, when I wore a new shade of lipstick. He made me feel visible. Like I was still someone worth looking at. Worth knowing. It was subtle, at first. Just casual visits. A knock on the door. James home. Oh, he's not? Well, mind if I come in anyway? And I never said no. The truth is, I was lonely. Not just alone. Lonely. The kind of loneliness that wraps itself around your chest and squeezes when no one's watching. I missed being touched, being talked to, being seen. I missed feeling like I mattered. With James, everything had become a checklist. Groceries, bills, school events. But with his friends? I laughed again. I felt lighter. Not entirely whole, but not invisible either. I knew it was dangerous. I knew what it could look like. But when you've been starving for affection, even crumbs start to feel like a feast. And in that quiet, well-decorated house, filled with eucalyptus candles and memories I was trying to preserve, 3 men stepped in and unknowingly stepped into a space James had left wide open. I didn't think much of it at the time. I told myself it was normal, innocent. But looking back now, I think part of me knew something was about to change, and none of us would walk away untouched. It started simply enough. James had another trip coming up, a weekend business retreat with his company. Nothing unusual. He was always traveling. Always in some hotel, some conference room, chasing the next deal. By then, I had stopped asking questions. I didn't even bother pretending I was upset anymore. The day before he left, as he was packing, he casually mentioned that his friends might swing by while he was gone. They'll probably hang out for a bit, watch the game or something, he said, barely looking up from his suitcase. Just, be nice. Make sure they're comfortable. I laughed a little, mostly out of disbelief. So now I'm hosting your friends while you're away? He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, more of a formality than affection, and said, "You've always been a great hostess." And that was it. That was the moment. So small, so ordinary. But those are the ones that sneak up on you. The next afternoon, the rain started early. Gentle at first, then heavier. It drummed steadily against the windows like a quiet warning. I lit candles in the living room, made the house cozy. I figured if I was going to be alone with 3 men for the weekend, I might as well make it feel welcoming. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, nothing too revealing, but something that hugged me just enough to remind me I was still a woman, not just a wife and mom. Around 5:30, the doorbell rang. First Thomas, then Malik, then Evan. Each one carrying something. Thomas brought a bottle of red. Malik had snacks. Evan brought flowers. Not for James. For me. Just a little something for our lovely hostess, he said, handing me a small bouquet of white lilies. My breath caught, but I smiled, pretending it was normal. Pretending my heart didn't flutter just a little. We settled in the living room. The fire was crackling, the wine was breathing, and the laughter, it flowed easily. Too easily. We talked about old college stories, the kids, work, movies, anything and everything. I remember Malik teasing me about my grown woman wine taste when I brought out the glasses. Thomas helped me set the table without even being asked. Evan watched me the entire time. Quietly. Closely. I made them dinner, roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans with almonds. I'd made it 100 times before, but that night it felt different. I plated it with care, added little garnishes like I was cooking for someone I wanted to impress. They noticed. They kept complimenting the food, my kitchen, the ambience. I blushed more times than I'd like to admit. And then came the wine. 1 glass turned into 2. 2 turned into 3. The laughter got louder. The eye contact lingered longer. The casual touches, like Thomas brushing my arm when he passed behind me, began to feel charged. Malik made a joke about how James was lucky. Evan didn't laugh. He just looked at me. And I'll never forget that look. It wasn't overtly suggestive. It wasn't even inappropriate, not exactly. But it was intense. Quiet. A look that held something unspoken. Like a question hanging in the air between us. My heart skipped a beat. Not because I was scared. Because I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Seen. Wanted. Alive. And I pretended not to notice. I turned away, laughed at another one of Malik's stories, poured myself more wine. But the damage was already done. That night, after they left and the house fell silent again, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty bottle on the counter. The scent of Evan's cologne still lingered faintly in the air. I could still hear Thomas's gentle voice. Still feel the echo of Malik's laughter vibrating through the floor. But it was Evan's gaze that stayed with me the most. It followed me up the stairs. Into my bedroom. Into my thoughts. I laid in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, asking myself why I felt so restless. So warm, so shaken. I told myself it was just wine. Just loneliness. Just imagination. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted that night. Something real. Something dangerous. And I could feel it. We had only just begun. Was it wrong to enjoy the attention? That's the question that kept spinning in my mind the next day, over and over like a broken record I couldn't stop playing. Was it wrong to want to feel wanted? To crave the way their eyes lingered? To smile at the way they laughed at my jokes like I was the most captivating person in the room? I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous. Dramatic. That I was just lonely and letting my imagination get the best of me. But the truth? The truth was simpler. And messier. I was starving. Not for food. Not for gifts. But for connection. For something that made me feel like more than a housewife stuck on repeat. Yes, I'm a mother. And yes, I'm a wife. But before all that, I was me. And somewhere along the way, I had gotten lost in everyone else's needs, but my own. That morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual. I ran my fingers over the lines forming beneath my eyes. Lines James never seemed to notice. I applied mascara slowly, carefully. Added a little blush. Wore the perfume I hadn't touched in months. I wanted to feel something. Anything. And as I stood there, I had a flashback. To the beginning. To James and me in our early days, how he used to kiss the back of my hand just because. How he'd stop mid-sentence to tell me I was beautiful. How we couldn't keep our hands off each other back then. We didn't need reasons. We didn't need timing. We just needed each other. But somewhere between work meetings and school pickups, between unpaid bills and unspoken resentments, we forgot how to touch. Now, even when he was home, he barely looked up from his phone. The warmth in his eyes had cooled into routine. The excitement had turned into obligation. When I walked into the room, James used to light up. Now, he barely blinked. So when Evan looked at me the way James used to, when Thomas spoke to me like I mattered, when Malik made me laugh like I hadn't in months, how could I not respond? I should have said no to dinner the second night. But I didn't. They texted me again later that afternoon, asking if I'd be home, if they could come by to watch a movie and grab some takeout. I paused at my phone. I remember just standing there, staring at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. My heart beat a little faster. I wasn't confused about what I was doing. Not really. I was confused about why I wanted it. It wasn't about cheating. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about them. It was about me. About that cold space inside my chest that had been growing louder each day. About the silence James left behind when he stopped holding my hand. About the ache that crept in every night I slept alone, even with him right beside me. So I typed out 2 words. Sure, come. They arrived just after sunset. Malik with his usual swagger, Thomas with his calm smile, and Evan. Evan with that same quiet intensity. They brought food, Thai. My favorite. They remembered. We curled up on the sectional, a movie playing in the background that none of us paid much attention to. The room was dim, the glow from the screen flickering across our faces. I sat in the middle, Malik on one side, Thomas on the other, and Evan, he took the floor right in front of me, leaning back against the edge of the couch. Close. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of his back against my legs. I laughed too much. My smile lingered too long. My body leaned without thinking, and I hated myself for how easy it all felt. I kept telling myself nothing was happening, that everything was innocent, that I was just enjoying the company, just soaking up the attention like sunlight after a long winter. But deep down I knew I was slipping. Every laugh, every glance, every shared look was pushing me closer to a line I swore I'd never cross. And still, I didn't stop it. Because the truth? I didn't want to. That second dinner opened a door I didn't know how to close. And once it opened, everything began to shift. It started in ways that seemed small. Little things. Evan stayed late that night, after Thomas and Malik had left. Said he forgot his phone, but he hadn't forgotten anything. He lingered. Just stood there at the doorway, one hand still resting on the doorknob, the other tucked into his pocket. He smiled softly, that same quiet, thoughtful smile he always wore. I told him I'd grab his phone. It was sitting right there on the coffee table. But he didn't move. I'm not in a rush, he said. There was a pause long, thick with something unspoken. He walked back toward the living room, looked around, then sat again on the edge of the couch. So I sat too. Not beside him. Not at first. But close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body in the space between us. Close enough that silence didn't feel awkward. It felt charged. We talked. Not about anything deep. Just life. Favorite foods. Childhood memories. But beneath every word, there was tension. A kind of pull I tried to ignore but couldn't. When he finally stood to leave, really leave this time, he didn't just walk out. He stopped at the door, turned, looked at me. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You know, I always wondered what it'd feel like to be James for a day. Then he smiled again, said goodnight, and walked out into the rain. I stood there in the hallway, hand on the door, heart racing like I'd just heard a secret I wasn't supposed to know. The next day, Thomas stopped by. He said he was in the area and thought he'd check on the leaky kitchen faucet James had mentioned weeks ago. I let him in, grateful for the company. We stood side by side under the sink, both crouched low. The space was small. Our arms bumped once, twice, and then his hand brushed mine, warm, strong, calloused. He didn't apologize. And I didn't pull away. We stayed under that sink longer than we needed to. Fixed things that weren't broken. Talked about everything but what we were both thinking. When he finally stood up, he looked down at me and said, "James is lucky. You know that, right?" I gave him a tight smile. But something inside me ached. Then, as if fate was daring me to go further, Malik texted that evening. He was outside with a bottle of wine and said he had a story too funny not to share. He came in laughing, full of life, the way he always was. He teased me about my playlist. He joked about how I always wore soft sweaters that looked like heaven. He poured wine for both of us, dropped onto the couch, and before I knew it, we were shoulder to shoulder, laughing like we used to in college before life got complicated. And then his tone shifted. "You know, I used to think James didn't deserve you," he said, eyes locked on mine. "Now I'm sure of it. I should have stopped him, told him to go home. But I just sat there and let that moment pass between us like smoke, thick and impossible to grab. After that, things changed. They each began coming by more often. Not always together. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with a reason. Sometimes without. A broken chair. A borrowed book. A craving for homemade cookies. Any excuse. I let them in. Every time. The glances became longer. The compliments deeper. The silences more loaded. Thomas would bring little things, fresh flowers, candles he said smelled like comfort. Malik started calling me darlin' and resting his hand on the small of my back when he passed. Evan. Evan barely spoke anymore. But when he looked at me, I felt like I was standing naked in front of him, completely exposed, seen, and somehow still safe. Each man fed a different hunger inside me. Thomas made me feel respected. Like I was still worthy of care. Malik made me laugh, made me feel alive again. And Evan? He reminded me of passion, of fire, of the kind of connection that didn't need words. I knew it was spiraling. I knew I was skating dangerously close to something I couldn't undo. But I didn't stop. Because in their eyes, I wasn't invisible. I was me again. One night late, after the kids had gone to bed, after James had texted me a quick, "Won't be back till Monday," I heard a knock on the door. I opened it, expecting just one of them, but all three stood there, smiling, soaking wet from the rain. No explanations. No awkwardness. Like this was planned. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. And I just stood there, frozen, my breath caught in my throat. And in that moment, before anyone said a word, I realized this wasn't about James anymore. This was about me. What happened next? I'm not sure I'll ever be able to explain. But I can tell you this, after that night, nothing was ever the same. I should have said no. I should have closed the door, smiled politely, told them it was late, told them I wasn't feeling well, anything to stop what was already unfolding in front of me. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside, and I let them in. The three of them walked in like they belonged there, no hesitation, no awkward glances between them. It was as if they'd talked about it, as if they already knew what this night might become. The air was heavy, not with heat, but with anticipation. The kind that wraps around your throat and makes it hard to breathe, even though no one's touching you yet. I tried to play it off, told them to make themselves comfortable while I grabbed more wine. My hands trembled as I poured the glasses, and I could feel their eyes on me. All three of them, watching every move, reading every shift in my breath, every flicker in my eyes. We ended up in the living room. Same space as always, but that night it felt smaller, dimmer, more intimate. The shadows clung to the corners of the room like they didn't want to miss anything. It started off light. We talked, joked, laughed about the usual things. Malik turned on some music, soft, low jazzy. The kind of soundtrack that makes you feel something, even if you don't know what exactly. And then, Malik smirked and said, "Let's play a game." I raised an eyebrow. "What are we, teenagers?" "Exactly," he grinned. "Teenagers had fun." So we did. We played a game. Something silly at first, truth or dare. It was harmless at first. Light-hearted. Malik dared Thomas to sing a cheesy love song from the 90s. We laughed when he actually did it. Then Evan dared Malik to say something vulnerable. And Malik, always the joker, got quiet. Looked right at me and said, "I think I've wanted something I shouldn't for a long time." My chest tightened. The room went still. I took a sip of wine and smiled like I didn't hear it. But we all heard it. Then it was my turn. Malik leaned in. Truth or dare? I hesitated. My heart thumped so loud I was sure they could hear it. Truth, I whispered. He smiled, but there was no humor in it this time. Just heat, curiosity, and something darker. "What's something you've never told James?" The question hit like a slap. I froze. I could have laughed it off. I could have said something safe. But instead, I looked down at the glass in my hands and said that sometimes I feel like I don't exist when he's in the room. No one spoke. Thomas reached out and gently touched my knee. Just for a second. Just enough to say, "I see you." And then Evan leaned closer. His voice was low, deep, barely above a whisper. "If you could change one night in your life, would it be tonight?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. He moved closer, close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. He didn't touch me, but his presence alone made my skin feel like it was on fire. Thomas just sat there, watching me, not saying a word. His gaze steady, serious. Like he already knew what I was thinking. Like he'd known for weeks. And then, the question stopped. The game ended. But the tension didn't. There were no more dares. No more jokes. Just the four of us. Sitting there. In a room so full of electricity, I swear I could hear it crackling in the air. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. Twisted. Charged. And terrifying. I was pulled in every direction by every glance, every unspoken invitation, every part of me that wanted to feel, everything I hadn't felt in so long. I don't remember how long we sat there in that silence, but I remember how it felt. My breath shallow, my skin warm, my heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. And then something happened. Not one thing, not one moment, but a slow unraveling of boundaries, soft touches, lingering stares, words that weren't meant to be said out loud, but were. And when it was all over, I didn't sleep that night. And I wasn't alone. Not really. Even when the room emptied and the lights dimmed and I was lying in that bed by myself. I wasn't alone. Because everything they gave me, every look, every word, every feeling, I carried it with me. I still do. The next morning, everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. The sunlight filtered through the blinds like it always did, lighting up the dust in the air. The house was quiet, too quiet. That eerie kind of stillness that settles in after something irreversible has happened. Like the walls themselves knew what had unfolded the night before. My head was pounding. My body felt strange, like it wasn't entirely mine anymore. I moved through the house like a ghost, numb, detached, waiting for something, anything, to break the spell. But nothing did. Then my phone rang. It was James. I froze when I saw his name on the screen. My fingers curled tightly around the phone, and for a moment, I just stared at it, like maybe if I looked long enough, it would disappear. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I knew my voice would shake. I knew he'd hear something in it. Something I wouldn't be able to explain. He texted instead. "Just checking in. Hope you're okay." I typed back. "All good. Just tired. Kids are fine. Love you. Lie. Lie. Lie." I hated how easy it was. Later that morning, I found Thomas in the kitchen. He was sipping coffee in silence, eyes fixed on the floor. I said good morning. He barely looked up, just nodded, murmured something about needing to get going. Malik appeared next, shirt half-buttoned, a playful smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're gonna act like nothing happened?" I asked quietly. He shrugged, his usual boldness suddenly fragile. "I mean, what do you want me to say?" Before I could respond, he was gone. Left the coffee untouched on the counter. Left me standing there with questions I didn't know how to form. And then there was Evan. He was the last to leave. He walked toward the door like it was just another morning, like everything was normal. When he reached me, he leaned in slowly, pressed a soft kiss to my cheek, said nothing, just looked at me one last time, and then walked out into the morning light. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood in that kitchen for what felt like hours, listening to the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the ache of my own thoughts. The house, once warm with noise and laughter, now felt like a tomb. I cleaned, scrubbed every inch of the living room, changed the sheets, washed the wine glasses twice. Not because they were dirty, but because I was trying to scrub the memory of the night off of them. Off of me. But memories don't rinse clean. They stain. 2 days later, James came home. I watched his car pull into the driveway. Watched him sit in the driver's seat for a moment longer than usual, like he was bracing himself. He walked through the door with that same tired smile. Set down his suitcase. Kissed the top of my head like he always did. But when he looked at me, he paused, just for a second. And in that second, I knew. He noticed something. Maybe it was the way my eyes didn't meet his. Maybe it was the way I flinched when he touched my arm. Maybe it was just a gut feeling. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. I saw it in his eyes. A flicker of something. Not suspicion, exactly, but distance. That same distance I'd been feeling for months, except this time, it wasn't coming from him. It was coming from me. I moved around him like a stranger. Polite. Smiling at the right moments. Asking the right questions. But inside, I was screaming. Not from guilt. From confusion. From the storm of emotions that had taken root inside me, desire, regret, fear, a strange and terrible thrill I couldn't admit to anyone, not even myself. Every time James touched me, I felt like I was cheating on the memory of a night I both wished never happened and couldn't stop thinking about. I was no longer sure who I was, or what I wanted. But I knew one thing, the damage had already been done. I've played that night over in my head 1,000 times. Every detail, every laugh, every glance that lingered too long, every word that felt like more than it was supposed to, and still, I don't have an answer. Was I seeking revenge on a man who forgot me? A man who once made me feel like the center of his world, only to later treat me like a background character in his own life? Or was I just trying to feel alive again? I don't know. I really don't. Because what I did, it didn't feel calculated. It wasn't some grand plan to hurt James or prove a point. It felt impulsive, messy, human. Like my heart had been starving for so long, it no longer cared where the food came from. I betrayed him. But what's harder to admit is that I betrayed myself. I crossed a line I swore I never would. I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone I'm not proud of. And yet, there's another truth I can't ignore. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt seen. Not just looked at. Seen. Touched without being owned. Desired without being dismissed. Listened to without being brushed aside. It's a dangerous thing, feeling alive in someone else's hands. Especially when those hands don't belong to your husband. I don't know if James suspects anything. If he does, he hasn't said a word. Maybe he's chosen not to ask. Maybe he's afraid of the answer. And as for them, Thomas, Malik, Evan, I don't know if they've spoken to each other about that night. If they've told James. if they ever will. We don't talk much now. Occasional texts. A few awkward conversations when James invites them over. We pretend everything's normal. But it's not. There's tension under every word. A flicker of something unsaid in every passing glance. And one of them still looks at me like he's waiting. Waiting for me to say something. To do something. To open that door again. I won't say which one. Because honestly, I'm not even sure I could trust myself around him if I did. And that scares me. Because it means that night isn't truly over. Not in my head. Not in my heart. It lingers like perfume on a sweater you've already washed 3 times. Like a dream you can't forget, even when you want to. I try to be the same woman I was before. The same wife. The same mother. The same version of me James expects when he walks through the door. But I know the truth. I'm not her anymore. Whatever part of me crossed that line that night, she didn't come back the same. And maybe she never will. Have you ever been so lonely that even the wrong attention felt like the only kind you could get? So starved for warmth that when anyone offered it, you didn't check their intentions, you just opened the door? That's where I was. Not proud. Not sure. Just tired. Tired of being the last thought. The one James barely noticed unless the kids needed lunch or the laundry wasn't folded. Tired of sleeping next to someone who felt 1,000 miles away. Tired of pretending that wasn't breaking me a little more each day. So when his friends gave me what he stopped giving, attention, warmth, presence, I let myself take it. Does that make me a monster? Or just human? I know what I did was wrong. I know I crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. But I also know that behind every mistake is a reason. A crack that grew too wide. A silence that lasted too long. So tell me, have you ever been so empty that even a glance felt like a lifeline? Have you ever done something, not because you were evil, but because you were exhausted? Tell me in the comments, do you see it as betrayal? Or was it just a woman trying to feel alive again? Was it weakness? Or just a moment of being seen? Because sometimes, the deepest stories, the ones we're too ashamed to say out loud, are the ones that matter most. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, the raw ones, the real ones, the ones that sit heavy in your chest, like this video, share it. And subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Sometimes, the most dangerous doors aren't the ones we bolt shut in fear. They're the ones we quietly leave unlocked, hoping someone will walk in and fix what we're too scared to fix ourselves. Loneliness doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it whispers. It knocks gently. And when it finds you tired enough, it walks right in. I let them in. All 3 of them. And in the beginning, I thought I could control it. Keep it contained. Separate. But emotions don't work that way. Desire doesn't play by rules. And once that door opened, part of me never really closed it again. Now I live with the echoes. The memory. The look in James's eyes when he knows something's off but can't quite say what. The weight of secrets that hang in the air between me and men who once made me feel alive. I tell myself I'll never go back. That it was one mistake. One night. But some nights echo forever. And I'm still standing in that hallway, trying to find my way back to the woman I was before I let them in. I let them in. And I'm still trying to find my way back out.